Flint is a small town on the south bank of the Dee estuary in Flintshire, North Wales. It sits beside the water, looking across the estuary toward the Wirral Peninsula on the English side. The ruins of Flint Castle, one of the first castles built by Edward I during his conquest of Wales in the 13th century, still stand at the water's edge, a reminder of the town's long and turbulent history. By the 20th century, Flint was a working-class community of terraced streets, steelworks, and close-knit families. Many residents had lived in the same streets for generations and knew one another well. It was not a large town, nor a famous one. But in January 1976, it became a place the whole of North Wales would remember. Janet Commins was born in Flint to Edward and Eileen Commins. Her father, known to everyone as Ted, had served in the British Army before leaving in 1957 and finding work at the nearby Shotton Steelworks. Her mother, Eileen, was a nurse. They married in 1959, and Janet was their only child. Years later, Janet's uncle Derek Ireston would describe her as the light of their lives, while standing outside a courtroom after justice had finally come. Janet grew up on King Edward Drive in Flint and attended Flint High School. By January 1976, she was 15 years old. Quiet, shy, and slightly timid. She enjoyed swimming at the local sports center and spending time with a close group of friends around her neighborhood. Her mother later described her as a home-loving girl who had everything to live for. She had never had a boyfriend and was not the type to stay out late or wander far from home. In many ways, she still seemed younger than her age. Some of her closest friends were younger children, and at home, in the privacy of her bedroom, she still played with dolls. On the afternoon of Wednesday, 7th of January 1976, Janet returned home from school and asked her mother if she could go swimming that evening. Eileen thought her daughter looked unwell and told her no, she could go the following night instead. Janet accepted the decision and went upstairs to her room. But sometime later, she quietly slipped out of the house without her parents knowing. Before leaving, she wrote a note saying she would be home by 8:30 that evening. She went to Flint Sports Center not to swim, but simply to tell her friends that she would join them the following night instead. At around 7:30 that evening, Janet left the sports center and told a friend she was heading straight home. She never made it back. At approximately 8:10 that night, a 15-year-old school friend saw Janet near the edge of the school playing fields, close to the footpath leading toward King Edward Drive. She appeared relaxed and was laughing with two boys. One was described as thin and fair-haired. The other seemed older, perhaps around 17. The witness also recalled noticing a shadowy figure standing near a tree some distance away, though at the time he thought little of it and continued walking. When Janet had still not returned home by 10 o'clock, her father began searching the town. Ted Commins walked the streets, spoke to neighbors, and searched for any sign of his daughter. Finding nothing, he went to the local police station at around 11 o'clock that night and reported Janet missing. A search operation began across Flint. Days passed with no answers. The community waited anxiously. Then, on the morning of Sunday 11th of January 1976, 4 days after Janet disappeared, 3 children playing hide-and-seek near the local primary school made a devastating discovery. It was the body of a young girl. It was Janet Commins. Investigators determined that she had been attacked and killed shortly after leaving the sports center days earlier. Evidence was carefully collected and preserved. though the case would remain unresolved for many years. The discovery shocked the town of Flint. Residents struggled to understand how something so terrible could happen in a quiet community where families had known one another for generations. Janet Commins was 15 years old. She was a shy schoolgirl who still played with dolls in her bedroom and had left home only to tell her friends she would go swimming the following evening instead. She never returned home. North Wales Police launched a major investigation. It was one of the largest manhunts the region had ever seen. Over 10,000 people were interviewed in the week following Janet's death. All local young men up to the age of 22 were visited and asked to account for their movements on the night of 7th January. Officers conducted door-to-door inquiries across Flint and the surrounding area. Janet's mother, Eileen, in an act of immense courage, took part in a police reconstruction of her daughter's last known movements in an attempt to bring forward any witnesses who might have seen something. Among the young men visited and questioned by police was a 16-year-old local boy named Stephen Huff. His grandparents' house overlooked the area where Janet's body had been found. When officers asked him about his movements on the night of the murder, Ho told them he had been stealing petrol from a vehicle in Flint. He was subsequently fined for the theft. His explanation for his whereabouts was accepted. He was ruled out as a suspect and removed from the inquiry. He would not be looked at again for 40 years. Within days of Janet's body being found, police had arrested a young man named Noel Jones. Jones was 18 years old, an illiterate scrap metal dealer from the gypsy community. He was also arrested alongside a friend named Michael Orford, though no charges were ever brought against Orford. Jones later said that as a young, barely literate gypsy teenager, he fitted the bill for what police were looking for. He said detectives browbeat him and coerced him into making a false confession. He said he was shown statements by officers that he could not read properly. He said he felt he had no choice but to accept what was put in front of him. Jones pleaded guilty to manslaughter. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. He served 6 years. He said afterwards that the conviction ruined his life, that he was attacked while in custody and ostracized by friends and family on the outside. He had been 18 years old, unable to read, and alone in a police interview room. He had confessed to a killing he did not commit. The Commins family never felt entirely at ease with the conviction. Janet's uncle, Derek Easton, said the family always felt the original police investigation had been shoddy. Once Noel Jones was arrested, he said, the police were not interested in pursuing anything else. Any concerns the family raised were dismissed. When Jones pleaded guilty mid-trial to manslaughter, the family said they were never given any explanation. They were sent home. Nobody told them anything. The case was considered closed. Ted Commins, Janet's father, never recovered. He had spent his life working at Shotton Steelworks and serving his community and his family. After Janet's death, he gave up on life. He spent the last 13 years of his life in a residential care home, unable to communicate properly. His wife Eileen visited him every day. He died before the truth about his daughter's murder was ever established. In 2006, 30 years after Janet's death, North Wales Police cold case detectives reopened the investigation. Advances in forensic science had made it possible to attempt to extract a DNA profile from the semen samples preserved on slides from 1976. Scientists worked carefully through the preserved material and succeeded in building a DNA profile. It was loaded onto the National DNA Database. Detectives expected it to match Michael Orford. The man arrested alongside Noel Jones in 1976, but never charged. The database returned no match. The profile sat there, waiting. 10 years passed. In early 2016, Stephen Hofe, now 57 years old and still living in Flint, was arrested for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old girl. As part of that arrest, a mouth swab was taken from him. His DNA was entered onto the National DNA Database. Almost immediately, it produced a result. His profile matched the cold case DNA from Janet Commins' body. The chances of the DNA belonging to anyone were estimated at 1 in a billion. Senior Investigating Officer Detective Superintendent Easton Davies described what happened next. He said, "Very quickly after his DNA was taken in 2016 and entered on the database, it hit against a crime stain from that 1976 investigation, and that prompted us to fully reopen the case." Scientific Support Officer Tricia Foley praised the foresight of the scientists who had preserved the original samples in 1976. Without their careful handling of that evidence 4 decades earlier, the match would never have been possible. Stephen was arrested and charged with the murder and rape of Janet Commins. He was 58 years old. He had been 16 years old when he killed her. He had lived in Flint for the entirety of those 41 years. He had been married. He had children. He had watched the investigation. He had watched Noel Jones go to prison in his place. He had said nothing. The trial of Stephen began at Mold Crown Court in 2017. The prosecution was led by Mark Haywood QC. The defense was led by Patrick Harrington QC. The presiding judge was Mr. Justice Clive Lewis. The trial lasted 13 days. Stephen denied everything. He denied even knowing Janet Commins. He told the jury he had been stealing petrol on the night of the murder. It was the same story he had told police 41 years earlier. The story that had got him ruled out and allowed him to walk away. Noel Jones gave evidence for the prosecution. He stood in that courtroom and retracted the guilty plea he had entered in 1976. He told the jury the confession had been false, made under duress, signed without fully understanding what he was agreeing to. He said he had been a scapegoat who fitted the bill. He said the conviction had ruined his life. The jury heard the DNA evidence. They heard that the DNA found on Janet's body was 1 billion times more likely to belong to Stephen than to anyone else. They heard from the witness who had seen Janet with 2 boys on the footpath on the night she died. They heard about the footpath she would have taken home, the same footpath that ran beside the thicket where her body had been hidden. They heard that Stephen had been 16 years old, that his grandparents' house overlooked the scene, and that he had gone back after the attack and dragged Janet's body by the legs to hide it in the undergrowth. On 13th of July, 2017, the jury returned their unanimous verdicts. Stephen was found guilty of manslaughter, rape, and serious sexual assault. He was found not guilty of murder. He made no reaction as the verdicts were read. On 17th of July 2017, Mr. Justice Clive Lewis sentenced Stephen to 12 years imprisonment for the killing of Janet Commins and a further 3 years consecutive for the 2016 sexual assault, a total of 15 years. He told Stephen, "You have shown no remorse whatsoever for what you did to that young girl. You must have thought you had avoided responsibility for your crimes." Janet's mother, Eileen, was too upset to attend the sentencing. Her uncle Derek Easton read a victim impact statement outside the court. He said, "On 7th January 1976, my niece Janet Commins was brutally killed in Flint. I vividly recall the events surrounding her death and the misery and desperation her loss caused the family, but in particular her parents Eileen and Ted. He said, "Janet was a quiet, innocent, normal 15-year-old girl. It is so galling to think that the person who so maliciously and violently took Janet's life has been living in our community all these years. He has had a life. He has been married. He has had children. But he stole Janet's future, taking away the opportunity for Eileen and the rest of the family to see Janet grow up, get married, and have children of her own." Following the conviction, Noel Jones appealed his 1976 manslaughter conviction. The Court of Appeal heard his case. Lord Justice Leveson ruled that Jones had been the victim of a serious injustice and that he would be wholly exonerated from any involvement in this terrible case. Noel Jones was fully cleared. He had been an innocent man. North Wales Police acknowledged publicly that they had convicted the wrong man in 1976. Hello everyone, thank you for listening and drop any feedback below. I would love to hear your thoughts and hope to see you again right here on Cold Case UK.